Here's the lack of empathy. This is normal in our business world. You walk into someone's office, someone walks into our office and says, your numbers have been down for the third quarter in a row. You have to pick up your numbers, otherwise I can't guarantee what the future will look like. How inspired do you think that person is to come to work the next day? Here's what empathy looks like. You walk into someone's office, someone walks into your office and says, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. Are you okay?
How they feel about their own jobs.
What's going on?
How well their
we all have performance issues. Maybe someone's kid is sick. Maybe they're having problems in their marriage. Maybe one of their parents is dying. We don't know what's going on in their lives. And of course it will affect performance at work. Empathy is being concerned about the human being, not just their output.
Means that our friends
and we have to practice empathy.
They can trust us. They can turn
and one of the groups that we are pretty bad at practicing empathy with is our young millennials. At the
end of the day,
so let me show you what empathy looks like. Listening to understand, trying to understand someone's point of view and disposition.
As an aside,
at 100% of the talks that I give or the meetings that I have, invariably, someone will raise their hand and ask about the millennial problem.
And that doesn't mean everybody should be a parent.
Apparently, this young generation is unleadable. Apparently, they have confounded every single company in every single industry. And so now it's at the point where companies have given up and are now just asking millennials, what do you want? And so they say, we want free food and bean bags.
That is a lifestyle.
And so now every company has free food and bean bags, and guess what? Nothing has changed.
They will or need to go.
So what I thought we would do, is show you what empathy looks like. How do we practice empathy with someone we don't understand? How do we practice empathy with an organization or a group that we're struggling with?
And if you're good at your job,
so we have to understand that it breaks down to four things.
You'll get promoted to a position where you're now responsible.
I've broken it down into parenting,
you used to do, but
technology,
how to do that.
Impatience,
we just expect
and environment.
Leadership.
Let's talk about parenting first.
Somebody in front of the machine
Too many millennials have grown up
and so the reason we get managers,
subject to what has been described as a failed parenting strategy.
Nobody showed them how to do the
Too many of them were told as they were growing up that they were special, that they can have whatever they want just because they want it.
Do know how to do it better.
They got medals for coming in last. They got participation medals.
And the transition,
and the science on this is already good. We know that it devalues the feeling that somebody who works hard and comes in first place, and it actually makes the person who comes in last embarrassed because they know they don't deserve it. So it actually makes them feel worse. It actually doesn't help. There are a lot of kids who got into honors classes not because they deserved it, but because their parents complained. And they got A's not because they earned them, but because the teachers didn't want to deal with the parents.
At all.
Right?
What you can do.
Then those kids graduate and they start a job. And in an instant, they find out that they're not special.
Who will then impact
that you don't get anything just because you want it.
Right? Leaders are responsible.
You get nothing for coming in last.
For the people.
And your parents cannot help you get a promotion.
Get that chain right.
And in an instant, their entire self-image is completely shattered. In an instant, the way they view themselves has completely changed, turned on its head.
And then the people who
and so what you find is that there's an entire generation growing up with lower self-esteem,
figuring out ways how to build the company, manage the numbers,
Remember, they have grown up in an Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat world in which they're very, very good at putting filters on everything. They're very, very good at curating how they want to be seen.
Any company, for example,
and we think they're full of confidence. They seem to have all the answers. They seem to be telling us what to do. At the end of the day, it's just not there. It's just not true. It's just not true. Their confidence is a lot weaker than before. They don't know where they're coming from. They don't know where they're going. Cross something off your to-do list. When you win the game, when you hit the target, right? Win the client, get the promotion, whatever it is. That elation, find your keys.
Competing at that level. We're now working together to compete at a much higher level.
That elation comes from a chemical in our body called dopamine, right? Now, other substances, other things that release dopamine include alcohol, nicotine, gambling. That's what makes us feel good when we engage with those things, and it's the root of a lot of addiction. In fact, almost every alcoholic on the planet discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. You see, when we're very, very young, the only approval we need is approval from our parents. And then as we go through adolescence, we now crave the approval of our peers. Very frustrating for our parents, very important for us. It allows us to acculturate outside of our immediate families into the larger tribe. vibe, very, very important, right? It's a time of high stress and high anxiety, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends.
That you love your job so much.
Some people, quite by accident, discover alcohol and the numbing effects of dopamine to help them cope with the stress, and that becomes hardwired, and then for the rest of their lives, when they suffer some kind of extreme stress, they don't turn to a person, they turn to the bottle.
He says, quote,
right? Now we also know that dopamine is released with cell phones and social media.
And then he says to me,
so that bing, buzz, flash, and beep that we get from our phones that feels so good, it releases dopamine. We like getting it. Yes, we all hate all the emails, but we love the bing.
He says, when I go to work at
we've all been in this position. You know, you're feeling a little bit down, you're feeling a little bit sorry, maybe feeling a little bit sad. And so what do? We send out 10 texts to 10 friends. Hi, 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 and we hope that they write back because it feels good. Right? So now we have a young generation with basically unfettered access to social media and cell phones. We have age restrictions on alcohol, we have age restrictions on smoking, and we have age restrictions on gambling. We have no age restrictions on this other dopamine-producing device called social media or cell phones. It's the equivalent of throwing open the liquor cabinet and telling our young adolescents, I know this is a stressful time, try the vodka, it'll get you through these hard times. That's basically what we're doing. And so what's happening is it's becoming hardwired, where our young generation isn't learning the coping skills and coping mechanisms to turn to another human being when they're struggling or stressed. They're turning to social media or their cell phones. Their self-worth sometimes becomes wrapped up in how many likes they get. They obsessively check how many likes, and actually will get depressed
sort of abominable
if they don't get any.
This is not a new idea.
You see them going out with their friends, and instead of connecting with their friends,
articles galore about
they
what
will
leadership is.
Simply
we all
sit
kind of say the same
phone.
Thing from a different angle. So you can
let me show you something that's really powerful. Can I borrow your phone, please?
Most with you.
There's one right there in between you. Just let me borrow that for a sec.
What's the hang?
I'm asking you to give me somebody else's phone.
So I get this question.
You don't have to turn it on.
Which is,
I just need it.
What are the most important characteristics about being?
So let me show you the subconscious power of this device. What if I were to hold my phone while I'm giving this presentation? I'm not checking it, it's not buzzing, it's not beeping. I'm simply holding it. Do you feel like you're the most important thing to me right now? No, you do not. And this is an artificial environment. Now think about how often this phone is out while we're talking to other people. Hey boss, can I talk to you? Sure, what's on your mind? As opposed to
people will give blood, sweat, and tears for these.
Sure, what's on your mind?
The one thing
we go out for dinner or lunch with our family and our friends. We have meetings, and we put the phone on the table, which sends a subconscious message to everybody else in the room that this is not that important to me. You're not that important to me. And by the way, putting your phone upside down is not more polite.
Short-term gain, to do the right thing for you.
This is my favorite one, where the phone rings in the middle of a dinner, in the middle of a lunch, in the middle of a meeting, and somebody goes,
sometimes you get fired.
I'm not going to answer it.
Sometimes you'll
oh my God, just so magnanimous.
It's all true. And the courage to do the right thing in the face of overwhelm.
Put it away, keep it away, because what it does is it actually hurts our ability to relate to each other. Now you look at young kids these days, they're on them all the time. I don't blame them. It is addiction. We yell and scream at them, but it's like yelling and screaming at an alcoholic. It doesn't help the fact that it's a chemical addiction, right? So you take an insecure generation that now, through no fault of their own, struggles to cope with stress. They don't know how to cope with and deal with stress. And as they have told me, many of them will admit that they struggle to form deep, meaningful relationships. They will admit that many of their friendships are superficial.
It's not what happens.
Right? That their friends they know would cancel on them if they get a better plan, that they wouldn't really know who to talk to if they get depressed. And maybe they'll turn to an online support group, which is not a real thing.
That in turn
it's not
will inspire
human.
Those in your organization to also act with courage. In other words,
and we've seen the impact of this. We're starting to see rises of depression in this generation. We're starting to see rise of suicide in this generation. We're starting to see a rise of accidental deaths due to drug overdose from this generation. Universities are currently dealing with an epidemic that they've never dealt with before, which is the number of kids requesting leaves of absence due to depression. Right? Now, those are all extreme examples. The less extreme and more likely example is that someone will go through life just never really finding joy or fulfillment, and everything's just fine. How's your job? It's fine. How are your friends? They're fine.
Talk about that for a second.
But no joy, because you just cannot, because joy, fulfillment comes from this. It comes from human interaction. We are social animals and we need it. And we have to learn to rely on our friends. And that skill is desperately lacking. So you add in the next one, impatience. This generation is often accused of being entitled. And if you've worked with any of them before, sure seems that way. But I would argue that we're misreading the tea leaves. They're not entitled. They're impatient. Again, let's practice empathy. How did they grow up? They grew up in a world of instant gratification. You want to buy something, you go on Amazon, it shows up the next day. You want to watch a movie, you don't check movie times, you just log on and download it whenever you want to watch it. Stream it, right? You want to watch a TV show, you don't wait week to week to week. You just binge watch for the weekend. In fact, if you want to get hold of somebody, you don't leave a message on their machine and wait 4 hours for them to get the message and call you back. You just text them and they'll call you, they'll get back to you literally instantaneously. Heck, if you want to go on a date, you don't even have to be like, hey, you just swipe right. You got a date.
Being vulnerable is the willingness to express the feelings you have towards
Never learn the skill set of like,
without fear.
What are you doing, right? You can have 4 dates in a night. In other words, everything comes instantaneously. They have falsely applied the instant gratification model to life fulfillment and career fulfillment. They want it all instantaneously. The problem is life, relationships, career are not destinations like, look, I found the job I love. That's not how it works. It's not a scavenger hunt. I'm looking for the job that will. No, it doesn't work that way. It's a journey.
But that's what a strong environment means.
Like it's the same with love. It's like I found love. No, you didn't. You work hard every single day to stay in love.
That is okay with
It's a journey. It's as if they're standing at the foot of a mountain. They know exactly what they want. They can see the summit. What they don't see is the mountain. I talked to some recent college grads who are in their entry-level jobs on a regular basis, and I'll ask them things like, how's it going? And they'll say, yeah, I think I'm going to quit. I'm like, why? They're like, I'm not making an impact. I'm like, you've been here 8 months, right? And this is the problem. They see it as destination. I'm not making an impact. I hear it all the time. But they don't even know what that means, impact. Yes, we all want to make an impact. What kind of impact? What do you want to do? How do you want to contribute to the world? This is what vision is. This is what why is. It's become generic and abstract. But the problem is they're wafting around. They're looking for the right. They'll go from job to job to job, hoping that the next one sticks. They go from relationship to relationship, hoping that the next one is the love that I've been looking for. They don't know how to ask for help, and it makes them feel even worse because they can't find the thing that they're looking for. Maybe it's me.
Trust.
So you have an insecure generation that doesn't have coping mechanisms, that wants everything resolved and resolved now.
It's not that I don't know that it exists.
I have a thought. Let me just send a text, as opposed to let me wait an hour when I'm done with lunch with you, and then I'll send my text. I've never met a CEO in my life who doesn't. And then we get to the fourth and most egregious of the four observations: environment.
Literally,
we're now taking this wonderful, smart, idealistic, ambitious, hardworking, good group of people that were dealt a bad hand, and we're putting them in corporate environments that do not care about them as human beings.
What gets measured gets done.
Right?
These things are
we have, for some reason, our work world has changed over the past 20 and 30 years. We are suffering the side effects of business theories left over from the 80s and 90s. And they are bad for people, and they are bad for business. Let me give you an example.
Metrics are fine.
The concept of shareholder supremacy
not in the short term, and they're just not
was a theory proposed
so, for example,
in the late 1970s. It was popularized in the 80s and 90s. It is now standard form today. You talk to any public company and you ask them their priority, and they say maximize shareholder value.
Now you love her.
Really?
Right?
That's like a coach prioritizing the needs of the fans over the needs of the players. How are you going to build a winning team with that model? But that's normal today. We don't even perceive it as broken or damaged or wrong or outdated.
It's about transition.
Remember, the 80s and 90s were boom years with relative peace and a kinder, gentler Cold War. Nobody was practicing hiding under their desks in school anymore.
If you go to the gym the next day,
we are no longer in those times. These are no longer boom years. These are no longer peaceful times, and those models cannot work today.
It must not be effective.
Here's another one.
Right?
mass layoffs,
or if you fundamentally believe
using
that
someone's
this is the right course of
livelihood
action and you
to
stick
balance the books.
like in a relationship.
Right?
I bought her
It's so
flowers and I wish
normal
her
in
happy
America
birthday.
today that we don't even understand
doesn't
how
love it.
broken and how damaging it is, not only to human
That's not what
beings,
happens. If you-
but to
if you
business.
believe there's something
You know,
there,
companies talk about how they want to build trust and cooperation, and they announce a round of
commit
layoffs.
yourself to
Do
the
you know the
regime,
quickest
the
way to
exercise.
destroy trust
screw
and
it up.
destroy cooperation in a
Complicate
business,
one day,
literally
you can
in one
skip
day?
skip a day or two.
Lay people off, and
It
everyone
allows for that.
gets
If
scared.
you stick with it consistently,
Right? Can you
I'm
imagine
not
sending
exactly
someone
sure
home
what day,
to say, honey, I can
but
no
I
longer
know
provide
you'll
for our
start
family because the company missed its arbitrary
Same
projections
with the
this year?
relationship. It's not about the events. It's
And
not
forget about the people who
intensity.
lost their job.
It's
Think about the
consistency.
people who kept their jobs.
You go to the
Because
dentist
every
twice
single
a year.
decision
Your
a
teeth
company
will fall.
makes is a piece of communication.
brush your teeth
And the
every day.
company
What does brushing
has just
your teeth twice a day
communicated to
do?
everybody else,
Nothing.
this is not a
Unless you
meritocracy.
do it every day.
We don't
twice a
care
day.
how hard you work or how long you've worked
It's
here.
the consistency.
If we
Going to the
miss
gym
our
for 9
numbers and you
hours
happen
does
to
not
fall
make
on the
you
wrong
working
side
out every
of
day
the
for 20 minutes
spreadsheet, I'm sorry, we cannot guarantee employment.
problem is we treat
In other words, we
leadership
come
with
to work
intensity.
every day
We have a 2-day
afraid.
offsite. We invite a bunch of speakers.
And we're
we give
asking
everybody
our
a
youngest
certificate.
generation to
You're
work
a
in
leader,
environments
right?
where how would any of us ever stand up and admit,
Those things are
I
like
made a
going to the
mistake?
dentist. They're very important.
We're
They're good
constantly
for
being told you have to be
reminding us or getting
vulnerable.
us back on
Leaders
track,
are
learning new
vulnerable.
lessons.
What does that
But it's
even
the
mean? It
daily
doesn't mean you walk
practice
around
of all the
crying.
monotonous,
I'm vulnerable.
little boring
Right?
things like brushing your teeth. That
No,
matter
what
the
vulnerability
most.
means is you
Didn't
create an
fall in love
environment
with you
in which
because you
someone
remembered her
feels
birthday and bought her
safe
flowers.
enough to raise their hand and
She fell
say,
in love with you
I
because
don't
when you
know
woke
what
up in
I'm
the
doing.
morning, you said good morning.
You've
to
given
her
me a job
before
and
you
I
took
haven't
your
been
phone.
trained to do it.
She fell in love with you
I
because
need
when you
help.
went to
I
the
made a
fridge
mistake.
to get
I
yourself a
screwed
drink, you
something
got her
up.
one without even asking.
I'm
She fell in love
scared.
with you
I'm
because
worried.
You had an amazing
All
day
of
at
these
work,
things no one
and
would
she came
ever
home and she had a
admit
terrible
inside
day
a
at
company
work.
because
You
it puts
didn't
a
say,
target
"Yeah,
on your
but
head
let
in
me tell you
case
about my day."
there's another
You sat and
round.
listened to her
And so we
awful
keep it
day,
to ourselves.
and you didn't
And
say
how can a
a
company
thing
ever
about
do
your
well if nobody's ever
is
willing
why
to
she
admit
fell
they
in
made a
love with
mistake, that's scared,
tell you
or they don't know what they're
exactly
doing?
what day,
And
and
so
it
we've
was no
literally created
particular
cultures in
thing
which
you did.
every single day
It was
everybody
just
comes to
because
work and
all of those little
lies,
things.
hides, and fakes.
She woke up one day and as if
And
she
we're
pressed
asking our
a
youngest
button, she goes,
generation to work and succeed and
Leadership
find
is exactly
themselves
the same.
and build
There's
their
no
confidence
event.
and overcome
There's no
their
thing I can
addiction
tell
to
you you have
technology
to
and
do
build
that
strong
people will
relationships at
trust you. It just
work.
doesn't
We're
work
asking
that
them to do
way.
this, and these are the
It's
environments
an
we've
accumulation
created.
of-
We keep
of
saying to them,
lots
you're
and
the
lots of
future
little things that
leaders.
anyone
We're
by
the
themselves
leaders
is
now.
innocuous and useless. Literally.
We're in
Points by
control.
themselves. People will look at little things.
What
that
are we
really easy to
doing?
practice and say that won't work. And you're
This is what
absolutely
empathy
right.
means.
But if you do it,
It means
consistently,
if there's an
and
entire
you do it in combination
generation
with lots of other little
struggling,
things,
maybe it's not
like
them.
saying good morning to someone.
It's like, you know, the only thing that
looking them in the eye.
the common factor in
friend
all my
George
failed relationships?
Who's a 3-star general in
Me.
the Marine Corps. He says his test for leadership.
Same
and I love this,
thing.
he goes, his test
Well,
for
we just
a
can't
good
get the
leader
right
is if you
the
ask
right
somebody how their
performance
day
out of our
is going,
people.
Actually care about the answer.
Right?
The number
It's
of
not a
times we'll walk
generation.
into a meeting, we're
It's
rushing,
not
we go, "How are you?
them.
Not good. I
They're
gotta
not
get to you later. I
difficult
gotta
or
make
hard to
it." If you
understand.
ask the question,
They're
you're
human
standing there
beings
and
like the rest of us, trying to find their
those
way,
little
trying to
innocuous
work in a
things
place
you
where they
do
feel
over
that someone
and
cares
over
about them
and over.
as a human being.
People will
By the
say,
way,
"I
that's what we
love
all want.
my job."
In other words,
Not I like my
it's not
job.
even
I
generational.
like my job means, yeah, the challenge is
It's
great.
all
They
of
pay me
us.
well. I like the people.
This is the
I love
practice
my
of
job
empathy.
means
That if we're struggling
wanna
to
work in
communicate to
work.
someone,
I don't care
if
how
we're
much someone
struggling
else
to
is
help
doing.
someone be at their natural
devoted
best,
to the people
I'm
here,
tired of
and
people
I
saying to
care
me, how do I
desperately
get the
about
best
them
out of my
because they
people?
were my
Really,
family.
that's what you want? They're like a towel, you just
business,
wring
we
them.
have
How can I get the
colleagues and
most
coworkers.
out of them?
In the military, they have
No,
brothers
how do I help
and
my people be at their natural best?
That's how they think of each other.
Right? We're not asking these questions.
If
We
you
are not
really
practicing
have a
empathy.
strong
We
corporate
have to
culture,
start by practicing empathy
will think of each
and
other
relate to what they may be going
brothers
through.
and sisters.
And it will
It's like a
profoundly
family,
change the
right?
decisions
No.
we make. It will
Brothers
profoundly change
sisters.
the way we see the world.
Fight, but the
Someone's
love
driving to
doesn't go.
work, you're driving to
Bicker,
work,
the love doesn't
and someone wants to cut into your lane.
I'll fight with
What
my
do?
sister. You
Do
threaten
you
my
pull your
sister,
car
you don't have
up,
to deal with
or
me.
do you let them in?
Right? We'll fight.
Most of us
internally,
pull our
we'll
cars
bicker
up
with
and
each
go
other,
like this.
But nobody's
You
gonna
wait
do
your
it.
turn.
If anything from the outside shows up,
Now let's
you
practice
gotta deal with
empathy.
it.
I don't know. Maybe they've been out of work for 6 months.
Brothers and
Maybe they had trouble getting the
Now,
kids
how
out
to
to
create
school this
brothers
morning,
and
and now they're running late for a really important interview, and they just have to get to this interview, and they're they're going to cut into our lane.
Parents,
or maybe they're just a bastard. I don't know.
Executives who care about their children's success.
But that's the point. We don't know.
Discipline them when necessary.
We
help
don't
them build
know.
their self-confidence.
And the practice of
so that they
empathy
could
will
go on
say,
and achieve something
I'll let them
more than
in,
you could have ever imagined
and
achieving
I'll
for
arrive
yourself.
to work one car
That's
length away.
leadership. An absolute love and devotion.
Right?
for
We don't always
people
have to be
who've committed
right.
their lives.
We don't always have to be in charge. We don't always have to be the one who succeeds. It's not about winning or losing.
So simple.
And that's where I go to the
so
second point.
Beautiful and
After empathy comes
unbelievably hard work.
perspective, where it's not about winning or losing.
Here's why it is.
In game theory,
said it,
there are
it's
two
hard to
kinds of
measure,
games.
right?
There
It's
are
hard
finite
for you
games
to
and there are
show
infinite
hard to
games.
measure in the short
And this is how you're going to change your
very
perspective.
easy to measure in the long term.
Right?
Over
A
the long
finite
term,
game is
the traditional
defined
metrics
as
will go
known
up.
players,
All your revenues, profits,
fixed
market share,
rules,
the
and an
traditional
agreed
metrics
upon
will go up,
objective.
and more importantly, they'll go up
Baseball,
more stably.
for example.
Right?
We
You'll
know
be
the
able to
rules, we
weather
all
hard
agree to the
times
rules,
better because
and
people
whoever has
come
more
together,
runs at the
they
end of
won't
9
abandon
innings
the
is the
ship.
winner, and the
Right?
game is over.
In
No
the-
one ever
over the
says, if we
long
can
term,
just play
the
2 more
traditional
innings, I know we can
metrics
come
just fine.
back.
But also over the long
Doesn't
term,
work that way.
your churn will
The game
go
is
down.
over. Right? That's
You
a
won't be
finite
going to
game.
employees as much.
Then you have an
Right? Over
infinite
the long
game.
term,
Infinite
you'll find that
games are
loyalty is
defined
high,
as
that people
known
will turn
and
down better
unknown
paying
players.
jobs.
The
Right?
rules
Over the long
are
term, all the
changeable,
traditional metrics
and the
are just
objective
fine.
is to keep the
And then
game
some.
in play.
It's only the short
to
term
perpetuate
that's
the
hard to
game.
Yeah, I'm going to say though.
When
there's
you
something
pit a
in
finite
between
player
those
versus a
two,
finite
middle
player,
to know,
the
'cause with
system is
working
stable.
out, so to use your
Baseball
analogy,
is stable. Right?
if you had
When
to
you
go to
pit
the
an
gym for
infinite
6 months
player
before
versus
you
an
saw
infinite
any
player,
sign of
the
change, no
system
one would
is
do it,
also
right?
stable.
And
Like the
there
Cold
are
War, for
so
example.
many variables
Because there
working
cannot
out.
be
The
a
number
winner
one
and a
thing is
loser.
to
There
know
are no
who to
winners
do.
and
Number one thing is
losers
to
in an
know what to
infinite
look
game.
for, right? So
Right? It doesn't
if
exist.
you don't experience
And
muscle
because there are no
fatigue,
winners or
probably doing
losers, what ends up
something different.
happening
That's
in the
immediate, right?
infinite
I know that
contest
the next
is
day.
players
If you
drop out
experience muscle
when they
fatigue
run out of the
and don't
will
notice
or
any
the
change
resources
within
to
a few
play.
weeks, you're
But there's no
probably not
winners
eating right.
or losers.
So there really are things
Problems
you can look at as
arise
you're doing the
when you
damage to
pit
the
a
muscle, but you're
finite
not
player
giving your body
versus
the
an
nutrients
infinite
that you
player.
need to actually
Because an
build.
finite player is playing to win,
So
and an
I'm sitting
infinite
here
player
thinking,
is
can it
playing
really
to keep
be
the
as
game
simple
going.
as, like, I have a
Right? This is
growing
what happened to
belief
us in Vietnam.
that
We were playing
part
to
of what you
win,
could
and
write
the Vietnamese
down
were
as the
fighting for their
leader's job
lives.
is to
We were the
connect.
ones who
How
got
do we
stuck in
connect?
quagmire.
You've given
This is the
very
Soviet
simple
Union and
examples, and they're all
Afghanistan.
incredibly real.
They were
Asking
trying
somebody
to
how
beat
their
the
day is and actually
Mujahideen,
waiting to
and the
hear the answer
Mujahideen would
and
fight for as
caring about what
long
the answer is.
as is
Time
necessary.
spent together, right? I couldn't have a
Quagmire.
very effective
Now let's
relationship
look
with
at
my wife if
business.
there actually isn't
The
time
game
together.
of
And
business
one of the things that I have
has
personally
pre-existed
struggled
or has
with as the
existed long
organization
before
grows,
every single
time
company
with
that
the
exists on this
individual
planet today.
becomes more and more
And
difficult.
it will outlast
And
every
so then
single
you start
company
focusing on,
that,
okay,
lives,
wait, it's
that
just
exists on
about
this planet
creating the
today.
environment. But as you
There's no
lose touch with,
winning the game of
the
business.
real
And the reason
sense of,
is because we
I
haven't
know this
agreed to the
person, and
rules.
I can see when they're
I
having a bad
get
day, and really
such a kick
leveraging
out of this.
what
You
we
realize
have
how many
to do.
companies
This is why your
actually
teaching
don't
is so
know the
powerful,
game they're
is
in.
you-
Right? Listen to
you
the language that the companies use.
wrap it
We're trying to
in
beat
the
number
right-
one
you can
where
nudge
no
sort
one
of
else in the
one way or
game has
other
agreed to the rules.
create something
It's
that,
arbitrary.
and
There's
maybe
no
it's as simple as,
winning because
here's
there's no
what I'm
end.
using this right now.
In other
The
words,
amount of laughter
companies
I'm
are
getting
playing
out of
finite
doing
games.
stuff.
Listen to their
But
language.
I'm really
They're
doing
trying to
it. I
beat their
really think
competition.
all day, like, how
What does
much
that even
laughter have I heard
mean?
today? And I feel
It's
like
the
when
leaders and the companies that
everyone
understand the
is
game that they're in and
making,
organize
really
their
taking
resources
an
and their
effort to connect
decision
with
making
each other, to
around the
provide them,
infinite
you know,
contest
there's
that
a lowering of
outlast
people's
and
defenses,
frustrate
and just a sort of
their
natural
competition.
outpouring of that is
All the
just
companies that we
joking
refer to
around.
as the
And so you hear
exceptions,
this laughter
Southwest
bubble, and things
Airlines,
get really tense and
Apple
stressful.
Computers,
I literally
Harley Davidson,
feel like you could
they're
have
the
a
exception.
decibel meter
No,
and just feel
they're
it
playing the
coming
infinite
down.
contest.
I mean,
They
look,
frustrate their
it's a human
competition,
thing.
is what
So,
happens.
just as you know how your
That's
body
what happens,
feels
'cause they're
after
not
a
playing
workout,
to
how
win.
your body feels after a big
Jim
race.
Senegal, the founder of
you
Costco, which is the only real company that gives Walmart a run for its money, he says public companies are looking to succeed for the quarter. He says we're looking for the next 50 years. You can hear him. He's playing the infinite contest. I spoke at a leadership summit for Microsoft. I also spoke at a leadership summit for Apple. Now, at the Microsoft Summit, I would say 70% of the executives, and this was under the Steve Ballmer days, I would say about 70% of the executives spent about 70% of their presentations talking about how to beat Apple.
You know, that's why we keep our walls and we're like,
At the Apple Summit,
yeah, his results are great.
100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with their competition. The other one was obsessed with where they're going.
But I will say
So at the end of my presentation at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the new Zoom, which was the competitor to the iPod Touch when it was a thing, right? And I have to tell you, this piece of technology was spectacular. It was beautiful. The user interface was incredible. The design was amazing. It was intuitive. It was one of the most beautiful, elegant pieces of technology I'd ever seen. Right? Now, it didn't work with iTunes, which is an entirely different problem. I couldn't use it. But that's something else.
And if you think about the reason that actually makes
I'm sitting in the back of a taxi with a senior Apple executive, sort of employee number 12 kind of guy, and I decide to stir the pot.
Memory. You just can't remember.
And I turn to him and I say,
and so
you
this is where
know,
leadership becomes very, very
I
interesting.
spoke at a
Because you have
Microsoft
company
summit,
that has a
and
lot
they
of
gave me their new
5,
Zune, and I have to tell you, it is so much better
clearly
than your
you cannot know
iPod Touch.
And clearly, as a CEO, like, I care about every
And he
single one of
turned to
my
me
people.
and
You don't even
said,
know. Some of the people you work
I have
for
no
are
doubt.
who work for you are bastards. You don't
Conversation
care about
over.
them, right? So it's a nonsense statement, right? But what you can
Because
say
the infinite
is, I
player
desperately
isn't
care about the people
playing
whose names I know and whose
to
faces
be
I
number
recognize.
one every
And I care
day with
desperately
every
about my
product.
leadership,
They're
and
playing to
I instill
outlast
in
the
them every
competition.
day
If
that
I
I'm
had said to
giving them
Microsoft,
tools,
oh, I've
and I
got
will
the new
take care of
iPod
them
Touch,
with
it's so
one
much better
purpose
than
and
your
one
new
purpose
Zune,
only,
they would say,
that
can we
they
see it?
will
What does
take
it
care
do?
of the people
We
who
have to
are
see
in
it.
charge.
Because one is
And I want
obsessed
those
with their
people to take care
competition,
of
the
the
other is
people
obsessed with
instill in them
why
and
they
take
do what
care
they
of
do, the other is
people in
obsessed
their
with
charge.
where they're
And then by
going.
the time you get down
And the reason
to the
Apple
masses,
frustrates their competition
where the
is
actual
because secretly,
1,000 exist,
they're
because
not
the
even
seniors,
competing
it's
against
like
them.
20.
They're
Right?
competing
Where
against
the real
themselves.
1,000 exist.
And they
They
understand
feel about
that
100,
sometimes you're a little bit
150
ahead,
can look to
and
one
sometimes
of
you're a little
their
bit behind.
direct leaders.
And sometimes
one
your
of their
product
direct
is better,
managers and say, that
and
person
sometimes you're not.
cares about
But if you wake up every single
our
morning
boss, that's my boss, that's
and
my
compete against yourself, how do I
vote.
make our products better than they were yesterday? How do I take care of our customers better than we did yesterday? How do we advance our cause more
By the way, I
efficiently,
hate the word
more
boss.
productively
Nobody wakes
than
up
we
in the
did
morning.
yesterday? How do we find
wants
new
to be
solutions to advance our calling, our cause, our purpose, our belief, our why every single day? What you'll find is over
But we do
time,
want to be led. I do
you
want to
will
be
probably
wake up in the
be
morning and
ahead
I want
more
to be
often.
led. Lead.
Those who play the infinite game
Absolutely.
understand it's not about the battle, it's about the
If you
war.
have the courage.
And they don't play
and I will
to
follow.
win every day.
So when
And they
scale
frustrate
shows
their
up, you
competition
actually still
until their
maintain
competition
the
drops
rules
out of the game.
Dunbar's
Every single
number,
bankruptcy,
but now they're
almost
done.
every merger and
And that's what
acquisition
effective
is basically a
hierarchy
company
looks
saying we
like.
no
Where
longer
every
have the
level
will
feels
or the
supported
resources
by
to
the level
continue to
above
play,
to take care
and we
of
have
the
no
level
choice
above.
to either drop out of the
if
game
you're at the front line,
or
you
merge
feel
our
supported by the
resources with
level
another
above,
player
and the
so that
level
we
below
can
is
stay in the game. That's what that is. And if you think about the number of bankruptcies
In
and
other words,
mergers
we're
and
all responsible for
acquisitions,
taking care
it's
of
kind of
another
proof
relationship
that
because
most
someone's taking
companies
care of us.
don't even know the game they're in.
Yeah, you've talked.
You wanna be a
super
great
powerfully
leader
about
and
helping
play the
somebody
game
else
you're
beat
actually
the disease
playing.
that you never really fully beat it yourself.
very much.
That, the parallel between being a leader